Okay, so we are back. I am recording. This should be our final episode. Let's see if I can squeeze it all into discussing the move and the Knots Unaliving from 1985. So what we're discussing today is how did Penn Museum have the remains still of Delicia, Africa in 2024, and how that kind of unfolded. So after they let the fire burn, um, and it caused mass destruction to the 6200 block of Osage Avenue. They had to go ahead and go through the rubble of the building. What they did do is they used heavy machinery to go through that rubble, which then further desecrated the bodies, making it very hard for the coroner or the medical examiner to go ahead and identify those bodies. So, what they did is they called in a professor from Penn University. His name was Alan Mann, and his PhD student at the time was Janet Mogg. She's going to be very important for later. The thing about Mr. Mann was that he was known for doing some very disrespectful things to bodies of African American people as well as Native American people. He was known for basically grave robbing. He would pay descendants of plantation owners and as well as go into other sites that he shouldn't be in to go ahead and steal bodies, um, to go ahead and measure skulls and things like that. He was trying to come up with a theory that was definitely placed on white supremacy. Again, this is for educational purposes only. Um, to prove that basically Native American people were conquered because we were less intelligent, and to prove that African American people needed slavery because they were less intelligent. That was his whole basis for doing this. So keep that in mind because this is a very important thing. So he had all of these remains of people that he was stockpiling only for the pure basis of this. It wasn't for anthropology, it was for white supremacy. So he took his PhD student with him. Um, During this time, there was a huge argument about how many people there were, as well as who these people were, if they were adults or if they were kids. He missed, he misidentified Delicia as well as Tree Africa. I don't think this was a mistake. He was an anthropologist, by all means. This was not a mistake. This was definitely deliberate. So in saying this, I don't think it was a surprise that part of their remains were missing. The fire burned heavily at 2000 degrees because of the extent of the heat from the boom dropping. So, it was very easy for them to just say, well, that's all that's left. And that's what they did do. So we move forward through time. Now, um, during this time, there's an activist and a community member. His name is Abdul Ali Muhammad. Now he already knew about um, Professor Alan Mann's past and what he was doing to African American and Native American grave sites. So he was actively trying to get those remains returned to a respectful burial ground. He was like, these people should not be treated this way. Their remains should be returned respectfully. So he was already on watch for Penn Museum and what they were doing, right? He was actively trying to fight this. So it just so happens. Oh, and I forgot to mention one fact. During this time, we didn't know this, but it was documented actually that Allen and Mogg were actively taking these remains that they had taken. They were taking Delisha and Tree Africa, who Delisha was 12 when she passed away. Tree Africa was only 14. They were taking those remains between Penn University and Princeton to teach classes on them. So again, no respect to the deceased. So anyways, uh, Abdul Ali Muhammad was actively trying to get these other remains, returned home. And at this point in time, people didn't realize that that tree in Delicia had been desecrated in this manner. It just so happened in 2021 he had fallen upon Mog's video. Now at this time, I believe I believe man had already been retired or maybe had passed away. I wasn't really sure. I couldn't find information on that. But Mog was still working as a consultant or a curator for the museum and was teaching classes and videos. So she was using these bones in a video. One of the most common ones was a video called Real Bones, Adventures in Forensics Anthropology. So it just happened that Mr. Muhammad, this beautiful man, had stumbled across this video in which Janet Mogg went ahead and was holding up different bones. Again, probably most of these bones, nobody consented to anybody using these bones for teaching purposes. This is different than when you decide to donate your body to science, obviously. Um, and she happened to hold up one of the bones, which I believe was a pelvic bone, and said, "See, this one is more juicy because it's more of a recently deceased person. You can tell the difference." That bone, I believe, was the remains of Delicia, a 12-year-old girl who was unalived. Okay, so I had to re-record part of this video, just fine. uh, so upon trying to get just a couple pictures, I found more information. So back in July of 2021 is when they were ordered to give back the remains to the remaining MOVE members. So supposedly they gave back all the remains. And then in 2023, Abdul Ali Muhammad found that he believed that Janet Mogg still had more bone fragments of Delicia Africa, in which we found out in November of 2024 he was correct. The Penn Museum still had remains of Delicia Africa. I could not find that they have returned those remains yet, just that they've issued a kind of obscure apology. Um, it is upsetting to me that they still are not treating these girls as human, that they didn't do a full catalog. They knew that Alan Mann and Janet Mogg stole remains from an active crime scene, and that they completely disgraced these remains and used them as their own personal science project. And yet they did nothing to really rectify the situation except to try and get themselves out of the mix by saying, well, we didn't know because they were moving them back and forth. I did find that Alan Mann is still teaching at Princeton University. So, shame on you, Princeton. You have a grave robber working in your faculty. I don't understand why you would want somebody that disgraced still working and teaching anthropology. I think that discredits all his work when you steal remains from an active crime scene. When you steal remains at all, that discredits anthropology. Also, when you can't identify remains properly, that should just discredit it too. If that was his excuse that he couldn't identify the remains, that means he's not that good of an anthropologist, right? Anyways, and also the fact that you still have his work published on your website. That was also co-authored with none other than the curator, Janet Mogg, who is coincidentally still using these bones. She's still using the remains of an unalived teenage girl that she stole. And you're still praising this work as a great piece of work. Shame on you, Princeton University. Not so prestigious of you. Anyways, so once it was discovered that Janet Mogg still has the remains. I did see that further in the article, her lawyer was confronted about it. His response with these claims are nothing new. So that just goes to show you how much they really feel about these children. These things shouldn't happen. People are people. Children are children. These were not science projects. They weren't an ancient artifact to be displayed and put around the country. These two little girls were little girls who were unalived on purpose by the Philadelphia Police Department in the city of Philadelphia for no other reason other than they did not like the movement that their parents were a part of that was spreading communalism and living off the land and trying to spread black empowerment. I hope that we learn something from this. I hope that we take something from this, and I hope that this doesn't happen again. And I hope that Penn Museum and Princeton learn something from this. Also, the email address that was on display, that was public information for Alan Mann. Found it right off the internet, in case you're wondering. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this and if you have any other suggestions what I should cover next, please comment below. I apologize that this video took so long. It was really hard to make. It was really heartbreaking. But thank you again for joining me along on this.